This time, I'd invite any public comment. If there's something you'd like the board to hear this evening, if you'd come to the microphone and identify the agenda item that you are addressing, and then also give us your name and address. Hearing none, we'll move on to our consent agenda. Are there any items that need to be removed for separate consideration? If not, is there a motion to approve the consent agenda as published?
So moved.
Second.
Motion and second. Assuming no discussion, those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say no. Motion carries. And our first program item this evening is presented by our Activities Director, Thane Johnson.
All right, thank you, Tina. Good evening, board. Usually, I feel like it's my 6th year here, and I feel like I'm usually the first one to kick off the Eye on the Tiger programs for a new school year. And with this year being obviously a little bit different, I kind of thought I would go over some of the information that I typically cover at a quarterly board meeting towards the end of school. So talk a little bit about what our participation numbers looked like for last year, and then also just kind of give you an update from the State High School League and some of the information that we've gathered here over the last couple weeks. So 2019-2020 participation summary, looking first here at the high school participation, and I don't have spring listed up here for pretty obvious reasons. I think I have an estimate though of what our numbers would have been, so I can give you that as well. So in the fall, we had 141 boys and 110 girls participate in activities, so a total of 251. And that was pretty on par with what our typical participation numbers are. Last year, we had a very high participation rate in football, with over 110 boys participating in football. So the 141, obviously football constitutes the largest number of that. On the girls' side, participation rates were good in tennis. We had a high participation in girls' swimming last year. We do have some activities that continue to, we see lower numbers in, hoping that we can spur some interest here as we go along and start to build those program numbers back up. In the winter, we had 104 boys and 87 girls participate, and again, nothing surprising there. We typically see a dip in participation during the winter simply because we don't have those high volume sports. Fine arts activities, which include our musical, one-act play, speech, marching band. We had 130 students participate in that. Fall marching was something new that we did last year, had a great turnout for that, great response from the community, from the school with that program. Planning on it again this fall, but of course that kind of changed as well. And I'll touch on that a little bit here too as we move forward and what our plan for this year could possibly look like depending on some of the decisions made by the governor and MDH and MDE. Looking at our clubs, which include HOSA, which is our Health Occupations Students of America, Intramural Basketball, Robotics, Knowledge Bowl Math League, we had 133 students total participate in those activities as well. Highest participation numbers there, robotics, which is one of those, again, I always talk about activities that we see an increasing number in. Robotics is definitely one of those. We had a good participation number in intramural basketball, so providing that opportunity for the kids who may not necessarily participate on the varsity basketball team, but still want to be active. And then strength and conditioning, we had 21 in the fall and 37 in the winter, which again, not surprising. Because of that high number of participation, especially on the boys' side in the fall, our numbers there tend to be a little bit lower. Looking at the spring, and again, this is just kind of a rough estimate on the high school side, we had 184 students registered to participate in our spring sports before COVID-19 ended those seasons. So good numbers. We had a high number in baseball. We had 65 students that were registered to play baseball, followed closely in numbers track and field, and then softball were our top 3 in the spring. So nothing really new on the high school side. Like I said, those numbers are pretty on par with what we typically see in a given year. So pretty happy with all of those, from the sports to the activities, seeing the participation numbers hold pretty steady on what we've seen in past years. Going to the middle school now, fall and winter, and I don't have spring numbers for the middle school simply because it was incomplete registration. We hadn't started any practices or anything like that for the middle school when the spring season shut down. In the fall, 97 boys, 107 girls, so a total of 204. Really, really good numbers on the girls' tennis side for middle school. So that's exciting to see. That's a program that we're expecting to see continue to grow. We had over 30 girls play middle school tennis last year, so that's fun, and it's nice to be able to have the new tennis courts down at Park, and they have a pretty good facility to practice and play on down there. In the winter, we had 60 boys and 33 girls, so 93 total for that. And again, not a surprise that we see a little bit of a dip there in the winter just because we don't have the high volume sports. Fine arts, there were 38 middle school students who participated in the middle school musical, so that was a good number. Clubs, we just run robotics for the middle school, and we had 15 there. And then strength and conditioning, we had 25 both in the fall and the winter for middle school students participating. So again, good numbers in our 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. Numbers that obviously we could have some room for improvement, but seem to be holding pretty steady. Before we move on from participation, any questions from the board? Okay. Always looking for those multiple registrations, the kids who do more than one activity. We had 125 high school students that had registered for 2 activities and 43 that had registered for 3. And again, we have we recognize right now just our 3-sport athletes and it's on a graduated scale. Freshmen get t-shirts. Sophomores this year got a 3/4 zip polo. Juniors got a hooded sweatshirt, and then seniors get a nice plaque given to them at our senior awards banquet. A little bit from the State High School League now as we move into fall, and I guess first of all, our fall practice for the activities that are currently going, things have been going really well. We haven't had to stop any practices because of any positive cases, either here or in other schools. So what our coaches are doing and what we're making sure, they're wearing masks, social distance, all that stuff is working for us and for the schools around us where we haven't had to put the brakes on any of our activities. Tomorrow, there is a board workshop to discuss any possible postseason opportunities. Right now, with the early decisions by the State High School League, they left that open. They hadn't made any decisions about any section tournaments or state tournaments, anything like that. Tomorrow, starting at 2 o'clock, there is a workshop for the executive board of the State High School League. That they'll be talking about those possibilities. It's just a workshop. There is no action to be taken. The next executive board meeting is October 1st. So any recommendations or anything that comes from the workshop tomorrow won't be voted on until October 1st, and then we'll know a little bit more of what that's going to look like. Also on October 1st at the executive board meeting, we're expecting that the remainder of the 2020-2021 calendar will be released, what winter sports will look like, what spring sports might look like, what that 4th season of volleyball and football might look like as well. The next point up there does say we're waiting on guidance for activities like 1X, speech, and robotics. We got that last Friday. We were emailed guidance from the State High School League of what 1X competition might look like, what speech might look like. They left the door open for some virtual competitions, but they are encouraging face-to-face, following proper procedures, masking, social distance, and that kind of thing. So it looks like they're ready to move forward with some of that stuff. I've talked to Jason Olson, who directs both 1Act and speech. He's going to get that going here this fall. So we can get kids participating in that way as well. And I did meet with the fine arts directors to discuss any options for this year. what concerts might look like, the possibility of a musical, those kind of things. And obviously, a lot of that hinges on if we're able to have audiences. Right now, band and choir are both leaning towards a virtual performance, whether it's working through HCVN or something like that, to be able to showcase those talents. Musical, we are right now looking at moving it to possibly February or March, because the hope is by that point, we'll know a little bit more from the governor and from MDH and MDE of what it might look like if we're able to have people in the buildings or not. Unfortunately, we did come to the conclusion that we would not be able to have a middle school musical this year. So that's disappointing, but in talking with Laura Leopold, we thought it was probably best. Usually they've already made their decision of what to do, and with so many unknowns, this year we did make that difficult decision not to have a middle school musical year, but hopefully bringing it back for next year. So we do have some options on the table for those as well, for those kids to participate and to be able to, again, showcase their talents to the community and the school. That
Quick
is what I
question.
have right
Did
now.
you say anything about robotics, what the plan is there?
We're waiting on that. I've talked to our middle school advisors and our high school advisors as well. With the middle school robotics, the problem we run into is space. How to space those kids out and where they're able to set up. We've looked at some rooms in the middle school as possible locations, and there hasn't been a whole lot of guidance from the State High School League on robotics, and part of that is it doesn't necessarily fall under their umbrella. They're a partner in robotics, but it's not one of their sponsored activities. And so there has been a little bit of information that has come from their state associations. So we're just waiting on a little bit more of that.
Hey, Thane.
Yeah.
So there's a movement at present, it's called Let Them Play, in
Yes.
order to try to get football moved back to fall, and volleyball for that matter
Yes,
as well. Do you know where that stands at all? And I know you said that the executive board won't meet until the 1st,
Yep.
and they're not gonna take any action on anything tomorrow, but have you heard anything about that?
Yeah, a little bit. You are correct. Right now, and it started with football, but the State High School League has made it very clear that any decision about football is also going to include volleyball, which makes sense. You can't, I don't think you can move one without the other. I have heard rumblings that there is going to be some discussion about the possibility of whether it's a special meeting or anything like that at the workshop tomorrow, at least making that proposal. But we don't know much more beyond that. I think as ADs, we've obviously had the discussion of, do we want to see, do we want to see everybody participating, and do we want to see this happen? Yes, but at the same time, we have to be realistic in what that would look like. And right now, we haven't talked anything about schedules or, what safety protocols there are going to be. So there's a lot of logistics out there that would need to be tackled, but that movement, it feels like in the last week or so, has really, really gained some momentum.
So Thane, if we have volleyball back in our buildings, where does that leave other groups that would like to be back in our buildings?
And that is a great question. Like I say, there's a lot of dominoes lined up that if one decision is made, we're going to have to start exploring a lot of other possibilities and a lot of other, like I say, there's going to be groups that are going to be wanting to use the facility, and so we're watching that very, very closely to see what direction the State High School League moves in.
Do we have any athletes that are trying a new sport? We have any football players that have gone out for soccer?
We do.
Or
We have three
swimming-
football.
or not
Yeah, we have 3 football players who are playing boys soccer this year. We do have a couple volleyball players that are trying out girls soccer, and that's really where we've seen. That's all we've seen. Like we've kind of talked about, if I'm a sophomore or junior in high school, I'm not necessarily just going to jump into competitive swimming right away, or even tennis, if I haven't played it before. There are other schools that we've talked to. Glencoe Silver Lake in particular has had quite a few of their volleyball players switch over to tennis. So we have a couple. Yep.
Yeah.
So it's worth them giving a try, that's for sure.
I have another question.
Mm-hmm.
Football is allowed, and I just know about football.
Yep.
12 practices?
Yes.
Are we doing that?
We started today. So today was the first day that football and volleyball could have their practices, and the State High School League is 12. Originally, we were not going to, because we all, in talking with Coach Rosberg, like he said, football isn't a whole lot of fun to practice if you don't have a game on Friday night. And so we said, you know what, let's give the kids a break, let them, explore other opportunities if they wanted to. But now with the let them play movement and the possibility of football coming back, we did decide to start practice today. They split their kids up into 2 different groups. To limit or, to try and minimize as much contact as we could. Registration was interesting. We had to get that going pretty quick. And we're close to 90 kids that we got registered between Friday and today.
Yeah. So, and volleyball is in our gyms?
Yes.
So if I was a parent that was really upset about high tides, not being able to swim, and then I heard that the gym is open for volleyball and the fields are open for football, even though there's no season, and it's almost like it's encouraging that movement, which I don't really think is our role.
Right. And part of it with volleyball and football is because those are school programs, whereas high tides is not.
Sure.
And that's, yeah.
So there's no volleyball tournaments, there's no young
Correct.
kids practicing in our gyms?
Nope.
There's
Nope.
nothing like that going on?
Nope, right now it's 9
No
through 12.
dancers are dancing in our gyms?
Nope, right now it's our 9th through 12th grade
It's just hard to
volleyball players.
explain to people.
Well,
It
that's-
is.
Yeah,
It-
that's
it-
a distinction without a difference. I mean, if
Yes.
this is truly based on health is why we're doing this, and we're gonna allow volleyball, even, our own in-house
Correct.
program back in,
Yep.
I don't know how you can, say no to the rest of the people that are
Right.
lined up to use our facilities.
Yep. And that's why I was a little bit surprised that the State High School League even offered that as a possibility, of being able to practice. And then, like I say, they also gave that same opportunity to the spring sports that lost their season last year. Yeah, it puts school districts in a very difficult position to, to look like, we're picking and choosing which ones we can allow and not.
Right.
Is the fact that, and I think this needs to be talked about for a second because we've gotten the emails, we're getting the calls, we're getting all of that, is the reason why we can't have high tides, and let's just be honest, that's the group right now that is upset, is the reason is because we're in hybrid, or is that the reason? And that maybe that's a Darren question, maybe that's a Thane question, or what?
And that's what we've talked about, both Darren and I, and that's really what it comes down to. And we've had groups ask about open gyms, basketball and that kind of stuff. And what we've said is when we get down to the numbers where we can bring everybody face to face, we'll start exploring, opening up facilities again. But for right now, while we're in hybrid, I think it makes the most sense.
Okay. Yeah, and I think the frustration with high tides is that they have no other option.
Correct.
Any soccer organization, if there was football or if you wanted to run something
Right.
cross country or something, they can run wherever, they can do that kind of stuff, but high tides is limited
Right,
to where they can go.
right. Yep,
So-
absolutely. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think you need to be ready. If we open the gym to volleyball here,
Right. It's, oh, yeah.
Like,
It
Yeah.
does
Like
feel,
real
it
soon.
feels almost
Yeah.
Right.
like
Yep, and like I
they're
say,
either open or closed.
right. And part of it again was, the State High School League factor, and it's our kids, and it's, and you're not bringing in outside individuals, and so right now, we're limiting it, just to the 9 through 12, the kids that are there every other day, so.
So what about you just said for the kids that are in our district?
Yep.
So if you're a homeschooled, not distance, but if you're a homeschooled student, you could join the volleyball team,
Yes.
correct?
Yep, and that's per the State High School League. A homeschool student that lives in your district can participate in your
So
activities.
they can come in and use our facility?
Yes,
But a club sport?
correct.
And if they're, you just mentioned it, but if they're in school, say on Tuesday, Thursday, they can practice Tuesday, Thursday. They can't be home on Monday and then drive to school and practice on Monday?
We have, yep, we are allowing that.
Oh,
Yep.
so it's not half the kids practicing?
No. But it's, let's see, I want to say for volleyball right now, we have 26 girls. So, which is far less than what we typically have in a usual season. It is,
Yeah.
you'll get no argument from me. It is a sticky
hard.
problem, and like I say, we're trying to walk that fine line of making sure we have something for kids to do, and giving them those opportunities, but at the same time, making sure we're following the guidelines and keeping everyone as healthy as we can.
So to highlight Chris's question from before, he was asking, what is the restriction around the outside groups? Is that our own internal ISD 423 plan, or is that the Minnesota Safe School Plan that's restricting that availability to
Yep,
outside
so
groups?
it's the Minnesota Safe School Plan.
Okay.
Which is like limiting outside groups and access to the non-essential visitors kind of thing.
Yep.
And so, and I'd be willing to bet if we took a poll of districts, most of them are following the same protocol and not having those outside groups come in.
Right.
Yep.
And I also do agree with Keith that I think this is a distinction without a difference. I mean,
Correct.
just because they're not our kids doesn't mean our kids aren't going to bring COVID just as easily as an outside kid
Right.
can.
Yep.
And so I think from a consistency standpoint, we have to be very careful about allowing some groups and not allowing others just because they don't meet the distinction of what's in the Safe School Plan.
Correct. Yep.
So, have we got the message?
I think so.
Good. Okay. Any other
Any other questions?
questions? So just a quick question. So, if you use the numbers that registered for spring, so
Yep.
for last year in the high school, what percentage of our high school population would have been registered for at least one activity?
For at least one activity, we're going to be close to that 70% again.
Okay.
Like I say, which is really where we hover year after year.
Okay,
Yep.
thank you. Anything else? Okay,
All right.
thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next up, I'd like to invite Dr. Scott to present our district highlights.
Good evening, everybody. I'll start with something that's not on the screen while Tina gets that pulled up, but it's great to be back here in person, and I've had the opportunity to meet with, last week, all of our district professional learning community leaders, and planning some things out for the upcoming year. And one of the biggest things that is a highlight, I think, that all of them shared is seeing the smiling faces of students in front of them in the classroom. Even though right now it's half of them, the students are very happy when they're in the classroom with their peers and seeing their teachers. And I know that our staff, all staff, are happy to see that kids are back in the building. I think that's a major highlight for this year, being able to start out with seeing some of our students. Oops, did I go to the end? No, there we go. Just one item for our families is our early childhood family education programming. I know there's lots of things on the screen that they're probably not able to see, but going to our website to be able to find the numerous family activities. Many of them are virtual, or all of them are virtual there on the left. Classes that they can take as a family with their children, to just look at those on our website. If there's still any preschool screenings that need to happen, just another reminder for our families to give that number a call. To go through that, and wanted to highlight our early childhood programming. This was summer school over at West, and students were practicing before they came to school some social distancing, and that's what we're doing right now with all the students back in the buildings. And I know that at both Park and West are safe learning recess zones. This is one item that some staff put together for activities that students can be doing outside to continue to social distance outside and be playing with their classroom peers. These are just some pictures of students at Park. And this was an example that Ms. Vadhauer, the middle school principal, had sent over with a student there in the hallway. The item to his right is a computer that they were doing in a STEM lesson, that the student at school was participating with the student at home. So this is just one of the many examples of the creative ways that our teachers and staff are finding ways to connect with students that are not only at home, but in front of them, and then having students connecting with their peers as well. So the hybrid model is certainly a challenge in that regard, but there is some great things happening in our buildings in order to make that happen. AP Scholars with Distinction, there's a number of students that had received a score of at least 3.5 on all AP exams taken, and scores of 3 or higher on all 5 of the exams. And most of these students that you'll be seeing have graduated, but this is the report that the high school had received. Here's another group of students that were AP Scholars with Distinction. We've had AP Scholars with Honors, and these students receive an average score of 3.25 on all AP exams taken, and scores have to be at least 3 or higher on 4 or more of the exams. So congratulations to those students as well. And AP Scholars, I think there's 24 up here, students receiving scores of 3 or higher on 3 or more exams. And students receiving scores of 3 or higher are able to transfer these credits or have the opportunity to transfer these credits to a college or post-secondary institution that'll accept them into their programming. This was a highlight that was shared by one of our buildings where there was some collaboration with our music department. The Park Middle School and High School, they purchased a device that had cost at the beginning, obviously, but is going to save a lot of money in the long run in terms of keeping our instruments, both brass and woodwinds, cleaned. So far, they've estimated saving $7,870 on cleaning costs. So the return on this investment is going to be profound, and it's much quicker. I believe the cleaning process is much quicker doing this, less chemicals used. And it's just an example of them working together and collaboratively and working through the budget process and coming up with a really good idea to save costs, even though something like this would cost on the front, but it's saving money for the district in the long run. And just a reminder for our families and community members that we have many resources on our Safe Learning website on our district page. With many frequently asked questions, general resources, responses, student screeners to be checking your children before they come to school for any symptoms, and technology information. So if there's any updates on any of that information, those will be marked of the date and highlighted what has been changed. It's just a location to continue to look throughout the year for updated documents. And I believe that's it. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Mike. Next item is the second reading of Policy 808. We looked at the first reading of this policy a month ago at our August meeting, and it is the policy regarding face masks for use in schools. Essentially, this is, we've put into policy the requirements and recommendations of the Minnesota Department of Health, so this shouldn't be anything too unusual, so we basically just, again, created this into a policy. And this is the second and final reading, so I believe I haven't heard that we've had any other feedback or changes to the first draft, so there's a motion to approve that policy that will go into effect. Is there a motion to that?
So moved.
Okay, motion. Is there a
Second.
Motion and second. Any other discussion? And for the public, policies are always available on the ISD 423 website. So if you're wondering what this policy or any of our policies actually say, you can certainly view those at that website. If there's no other discussion, those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say no, and the motion carries. Next item is the preliminary levy certification. I'm going to introduce our Director of Business and Finance, Becky Bull.
Thank you. Good evening. I recommend this evening that we certify our preliminary levy at a maximum amount. On September 8th, the Minnesota Department of Education released its preliminary run, which it's about a 42-page report. And if we were to certify a specific dollar amount tonight, we couldn't take more, but we could take less. And right now, I see that MDE has some late edits that they still need to make. They need to put some changes in specifically for our district with respect to 2023 student counts, as well as health and safety project levy amounts. So I would recommend that we certify at maximum in December during Truth and Taxation. We will certify a specific amount after I go through a thorough review of all the funds impacted by the levy.
Okay, and for anyone on the board, you've seen this every year. This is an annual event that we would certify the maximum amount. It gives us the greatest flexibility. And again, the final amount will be determined at our Truth and Taxation meeting in December, once we have all the information.
Yes.
Kind of a housekeeping item. Is there a motion to approve that maximum certification?
So moved.
Second?
Motion and second. Any other discussion? Hearing none.
I just have one comment. Becky, do you have any idea, based on the preliminary numbers, what the increase is going to look like approximately?
I wouldn't anticipate any surprises. Right now, the way the numbers are tracking, and then when I make manual adjustments, it looks like we'll be right in that 0 to 3% increase range, which is what we target to do, and also make sure that we're timing out what sort of increases we're passing on to our taxpayers. There shouldn't be any surprises.
Okay, good, thank you.
Okay, thanks, Darren. If there's no further discussion, those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say no. Motion carries. Thanks, Becky.
Thanks.
Next, I'd like to introduce again Dr. Scott, Director of Teaching and Learning, to provide an update regarding the MCA testing.
All right. So this will be fairly short tonight, but I can answer any questions that you may have. There was only one MCA that we were able to do anything with last spring, and that was the science test at the high school. And students who were able to complete their biology classes last spring, which was by the end of trimester 2, there were 165 students that were able to take the MCA science test at that time. There were still a few that had to finish biology in trimester 3, but last trimester 3 MCA tests were canceled. The state received a waiver from the federal government to not continue with standardized assessments, and that is just a historical view of the MCA science tests over from 2014 until 2020, and I have there in blue for the students who are able to take it, 165 tested. We had a proficiency score of 61.2%. So for the students who tested, that has been our highest score since 2014. There were about 50, 60 students that were eligible to take the test yet there in the spring. So depending on how they would have done, what our number would have been, but that's where it was in the spring. So there were no other MCA tests that were able to be given then in this trimester 3. So I wanted to update on that piece. We were able to do, to test, have access testing, and this is administered to English learners in order to measure progress towards meeting Minnesota's standards for English language development. So that's called the access test. And that's assessing comprehension and communication in English state to state. And there were 14 students who were able to exit EL services based on that, and there were 119 students who took the access. When students exit, they are still monitored to see over a course of 2 years to see that their scores can maintain, if there isn't any concerns with them not being able to continue that momentum and continue that proficiency, that they may have to be reassessed if there's concerns to then enter back into EL services. Students have to score, have a composite score, 4.5 out of 6, and they also have to have 3.5 or higher on all of the areas measured, which are speaking, reading, writing, and listening. It's a very involved process that our EL staff, well, all these standardized tests are, but this is something that our EL staff does on their own and administering all of these assessments, in addition to continuing the instruction for the students and not and pausing that very minimally as much as possible to continue then the EL instruction. So numbers of EL students continue to increase. I believe there's 9 or 10 different languages that our EL staff is servicing. So it's a very involved process. They do an excellent job with working with our students, and it won't be any MCA or access data that's comparable to the state. They weren't going to send any of that out because there's not enough data to do that. So all data that we have is local, and this year none of the data was embargoed. We probably could have talked about this as early as we had it, but this was usually on the agenda for tonight to be talking about this data. So the next question is going into next year, or this year actually, sorry. So for 2020, 2021, this is directly from a document, MDE testing 123. And this is what they're telling us currently, that statewide assessments must be administered in a standardized manner and environment. As of now, the Minnesota Department of Education is preparing for 2020, 2021 statewide assessments to be administered in person in school buildings in the spring. That's the guidance we're having right now. However, we, and that's MDE, are also aware of the unpredictability of COVID-19, which may impact schools' ability to safely administer these assessments, and they're going to continue to update us as things are progressing throughout the year. But at this time, we are planning, as the state is asking us to be administering standardized assessments in the spring, which start March 8th. That's the first test date for MCAs. The access for EL testing, that starts in January. And there's many decisions that are made on the access for EL, not only keeping students within EL and seeing their progress for exiting. That is important for those students, and then MCAs obviously for our internal decisions, but we'll wait to see what other information and guidance we have from the state in terms of standardized testing, if you get any questions about that. And since that's the end of the only test I could talk about, that's the end of the presentation. Are there any questions that you have?
Is the 14 that exited ELL, is that a good number? Is that typical?
That is, yeah, and I did look historically on the state, over the course of the 5 years I look back, just comparing what I could with the state, we are always ahead of the state average in terms of students that are being able to exit. And we do have to keep a pace with, the goal is that students exit the service, and they have a time frame in which they need to do so based on when they enter, their age. So there is a schematic in order for us to be following, and then that's where the state will tell us that you're either keeping ahead of that or you're behind in order to exit students when they're supposed to. Again, based on when they enter and their age, because they can accelerate much faster when they're younger when they start services, and then typically not as fast if they enter EL services when they're older.
I guess I'm hoping we can get a good MCA, sampling this year. It'll be really interesting to see what in my opinion, very disruptive, curriculum or schedule is doing to our learning.
You're right, and we will be doing local assessments with our FAST assessments with our K-5 students and STAR assessments that's all looking at reading and math assessments, just different acronym and different testing scenario or mechanism. But we're seeing those scores that'll start to be coming in now as we're starting to do the diagnostics here this fall to see what ramifications there were from the spring of not having necessarily full-time in-person education, and then what interventions or programming we need to continue to move forward with. So we may be able to do some updating here this fall just with some of our local standardized assessments.
Okay, any questions? Matt,
Okay,
thanks,
thank
Mike. Next item is a letter of agreement for our coaches and co-curricular advisors. Becky Bowl.
Okay, so we've worked with Education Hutchinson to put together a letter of agreement or an addendum to the existing collective bargaining agreement. And what it does is it outlines compensation on a pro rata basis for our coaches and advisors if any of the seasons are shortened, canceled, if there's any sort of suspensions involved due to pandemic, variables that are outside of our control. So we've worked together with Education Hutchinson on this. We recommend that it be approved so that we can administer payroll in the upcoming fiscal year according to the terms outlined.
Okay, any other questions?
This was recently you did this? I mean, you did this like after we settled the contract with Education Minnesota?
Right, this is for the upcoming school year.
Okay.
Yep, for the 2021 school year. And over the summer, Superintendent Vanderheiden, the union president, and then their regional representative, we worked together on what this should look like.
So,
It is
and-
based on the Minnesota School Boards Association template, and then the pro rata section at the bottom of the first page. That's the section that we worked on together.
So there was some collaborative effort and support for this agreement
Yes,
from
that's
the
correct.
coaches and advisors?
Correct.
Okay. And the main difference really is if a season is canceled partway through or whatever the pro rata difference would be, that would be the change in compensation. Is that essentially the summary?
Yes, and we did put a clause in there because, as you know, we could pivot amongst one of three learning models at any point during the school year, in-person, hybrid, distance learning. If we were to move into distance learning, it's been communicated to us from the Department of Education and the High School League that then we would need to suspend activities. That would not be a decision that we could decide to do otherwise. That is the guidance that we've been given. In that instance, we would continue to pay our coaches and advisors for up to 2 weeks because we think that's a reasonable time. Now, we would pay based on distance coaching duties completed. But after that 2-week period of time, if the season doesn't continue, then the last installment, would be paid 15 days from that last date of service for the existing school year.
So, and I guess I would just add, there seemed to be considerable misunderstanding last spring. So I guess going into, with these contracts, just make sure that it is clearly communicated. Here's the expectation, here's what will happen if something needs to change because of, again, the COVID, just to make sure everybody is clear.
Absolutely.
So is there a motion to adopt that agreement?
So moved.
Second.
Motion and second. Any other discussion?
So what if we switch, this is just, so you start coaching, and then we switch to distance learning, and so the season stops, and then it could happen that we would go back to hybrid again, then would it start again? So then it's like, I
Yeah,
don't know, it just feels a little confusing.
Sure, and it is a little confusing because we really don't know. But the framework for the agreement in front of you was written by MSBA specifically because of what happened across the state last spring. So at least we have something in front of us as a guide now that we didn't have in the spring. But I think everybody is asking those same questions. So what we're suggesting is if we would go into distance learning in the secondary setting, we wouldn't cancel the season, we would suspend it at that time and hopefully get back to hybrid or in person so then we could restart that season. So some of the other questions they were asking, it's hard to know what will happen. It probably depends on how much of the season is left, at what period, how many competitions there would be left, that kind of thing, and if there would be any postseason ramifications. Because at this time, we don't really know what that postseason even looks like or if there is one. So hopefully our numbers continue to go down and we don't have to worry about that.
Well, yeah, we likely will discover what holes are in this agreement once we get down the road a little ways, but at least based on what we know to be true on the last experience, hopefully those have been addressed, and I guess, we'll continue to refine that if we need to.
Yes.
So, any other discussion? Hearing none, those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say no. Motion carries. Thank you. Next item is board compensation. I left this on the agenda, just I wasn't sure if we were, still actively pursuing that. If there was further discussion, we can table that or, put that on an agenda somewhere down the road if you prefer, or discuss that again this evening. At your pleasure.
I have nothing further to add in this meeting. I think it can be tabled and we can bring it up again down the road.
Okay, so is there a time frame that we're looking at? I know we had talked about, maybe December's meeting. For those leaving the board, I think that was at least a suggestion.
Yeah, I think giving people ample time to review the data that Becky had sent out to us, and then reviewing that over the next weeks and coming months, and then acting on it, like you said, in December timeframe possibly.
Okay, so Tina, if we could just make a note to put this back on the agenda then for our December regular meeting, so.
I'm wondering if we shouldn't vote on this in October before the election. And this is just my thought is, I'm not on the ballot, and I think I'm the only one that will for sure be on the board next year. And so if we could vote before the election, then we'd have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 people that, could vote with the idea of it's a good idea or it's not a good idea, not it's going to benefit me or it's not going to benefit me. That's my only thought about moving the vote to before the election.
I would add Keith and I are on the ballot,
Right.
and I'm not sure if it's
But
something.
if we voted before the election, I mean, maybe you'll continue on the board, maybe you won't, but you won't be voting on it based on that. Whereas I feel almost like I need to abstain from voting. That's the way I feel. Like if we were going to vote tonight, I would abstain. Do you understand what I'm saying?
You wouldn't need to, but, I guess, other thoughts on that? Again, whatever the majority of the board would like to
Yeah,
do.
it's fine. We can do it whenever.
I guess my thought would be if the vote was held after the election, it takes it away as being an election issue, right? So if the vote is held right before the election, then it becomes an issue with the candidates.
Oh,
And then
okay.
it's more, I don't want to, there's scrutiny from the public either way. I don't want to make it sound disingenuous to trying to trick anybody or anything, but I'm just saying that
Right.
we want it to be an honest, forthright conversation, and I think more politics get added into it if it's held right before the election as opposed to right
Right.
before the changeover at the end of the year.
Right, and I think I was making the same point, but you're just saying that it would be more valuable to do it after the election.
I would think so.
Yeah, I agree.
Sure.
Okay, so we're comfortable with back on the agenda then in December? Is that where we're at? Okay.
Yep.
So Tina, if you could again, just make a note of that, thank you. One comment that I did have to that I don't know has really been brought up, but one thing for the public and the board to consider, is, this stipend. I guess I look at this as a self-employed person especially, and like if you have to go to a meeting, Dr. Pullman, in the middle of the day, there's some cost to you to do that. You are not in the office, or if you're an employee, and even if you have vacation, you'll need to use vacation perhaps, or there is some cost to board members, and a lot of things do happen during the workday. Everything isn't in the evening, so like I say, depending on your situation, that could be a little or it could be a lot. So I look at some of that as reimbursement really for people who are taking time away from whatever their business might be to do that. So, and board members are always just super good about, whenever we schedule meetings, they always try to manage to fit that into their schedule. So I appreciate that. So if there's no other comments or discussion around that, we'll move on. So thank you, Tina. On to committee reports, facilities.
Yes, the Facilities Committee met on September 9th at Central Office because of the weather. And Brian Moore talked us through all the projects. The middle school parking lot is finished, but parents need a little more education on how to do it. But, I experienced the same exact problem up in St. Cloud today, so, yeah. Anyway, I think parents will get it, and it'll be much better than it was last year. The new softball field is almost done. Grass should be planted this week. The stadium work continues. Let's see, West, if you've driven by there, you've seen there's a brand-new playground that they put together in an amazing short period of time and long hours. And I believe it's being used? Okay, it's being used now. The bid opening for the second package on the addition, or the new part of West, was on the 10th, September 10th. I haven't heard, but we're meeting this week, so we'll hear more. Then on September 3rd, we had our 27th Project Oversight Committee meeting. If you've driven by, you've noticed the trees are down and there's some site work that's being done right now. A lot of big machines are sitting out there. So that is starting. We talked then about park. We talked a little bit about room placement, especially on the lower level. Let's see, we talked about whether we're going to reuse some of the tile that's inside park. Talked about roof work, plumbing, and the stairs. So our next POC meeting will be this Thursday, the 17th.
Okay, thanks, Joellen, and thank you for your diligence in the many.
Oh, I've missed a couple of those
And
meetings.
POC
Yeah,
is,
thank you.
POC is POC, which is the Project Oversight Committee, so thank you for your time involved in that. Finance?
Yep, Committee met today, so taking a look at the financial reports and the August revenues, everything is on track for that. As far as the August expenses goes, that's also on track, but even though it's on track, there are some more expenses that are happening because of nursing supplies and PPE and, but also there's some less expenses are happening with extracurricular activities, and then the utilities invoices are not received and processed yet. As far as the levy, we talked, or that was discussed as well, and we did took action on that tonight with certifying that. Taking a look at the enrollment, there is an estimated decline of 50 students, and that could potentially increase to 100 due to the number of students in PSEO, homeschooling, and other things as well. So we'll monitor that. I'm going to skip over one part, Becky, on this, and I'll throw it back to you at the end with the stimulus funds to explain that a little bit more, if you're okay with that.
Sure.
We have agreements and contracts. We approved the activities agreement tonight, so, and then we have a couple of independent contracts that remain unsettled as well. And they have provided a comparison list, and they needs to be reviewed with the district comparisons. Just like you mentioned in the facilities, that's moving along, and the bid package number 2 with the birth to grade 5 was open last week. The bids are being received and vetted, and we will need to have a closed board meeting at some point to award those bids. The piece that I was going to come back to, Becky, was regarding the stimulus funds, and I just wanted to ask if you could just explain that a little bit more, and those amounts, and kind of how that applies to us.
Sure. So the federal government has allocated stimulus funds to states, cities, counties, school districts, and we have 3 primary buckets of money that are coming to us. Coronavirus relief funds, CRF funds. We have a bucket of money that's going to flow through MDE to us. The total on that bucket is $726,000. Then in addition, McLeod County has allocated $230,000 of their funds to us. Those funds have the tightest timeline, so we'll be spending those funds first. The CRF applications for both the county level and the state level are due October 1. So we're working on those as we speak. And then the CARES money, that has the longest timeline. So we plan to spend those dollars last after the other 2 buckets are completely depleted. The CARES money is $267,000. That's the estimated allocation. 90% of that is based on the existing Title I formula. So we do send a share of that to our non-public schools that would like to participate in the community. We do have very specific timelines. We have specific purposes on how we can spend the money. CARES is the most wide open. However, they do encourage you to spend the dollars in a way that meets students' most basic needs first. And so the governors, has a component of those funds, and those need to be spent on transportation and summer school technology is another piece. So those are some of the focal points that we'll be looking at as we move through the year. We will also be charging transportation costs in addition to personnel that we've hired and additional purchase services that we've contracted for in light of the pandemic and needing to make sure that we keep class sizes in check.
Thank you, Becky. That's all I have for finance.
Why is it a closed board meeting? Is that because, is it always closed when we award bids? I thought we just awarded bids at our last meeting.
Spoke, it's not a closed
Be a
meeting,
special
it's a
meeting.
special meeting.
Sorry.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
And then it's not on here, but, you know, we've received information about how the kids are getting free breakfast and lunch. That's kind of big, isn't it? Where's that money coming from?
The federal government is extending their summer feeding model, and so we'll be applying and retroactively, it'll be effective as of the first day of school. However, the government is constantly making big decisions, but then it's always a little bit after the fact because we started school a week early here in Hutchinson, and so we had been busy telling everybody, remember, you know, the paid lunch prices are at play. Remember the free and reduced app, which, by the way, is still very, very important because those numbers directly correlate to federal funding that we receive. So the applications remain important, even though, like you mentioned, breakfast and lunch is free until December 30th or when the federal money runs out. So we did indicate in parent communication that a change back to the paid meal policy could happen very abruptly, just like the news came out very suddenly
Sure.
From the federal government that we were switching to this model.
Is the free breakfast and lunch also for in-person? Like if?
Yes, it
Okay.
doesn't matter the delivery model.
Interesting.
Yep. So whether we're in-person, hybrid, or distance learning, it's one waiver that we apply for on a district-wide basis.
Okay, anything else? And just a note about the special meeting, I was gonna pick that up and then talk about when it might work for us in our upcoming board meeting schedule. So in just a few minutes, we'll hopefully be able to find a time that works for at least a quorum. Next is Parks, Recreation, Community Education.
There's no September meeting.
Okay, Schools for Equity and Education.
So our meeting for that is Friday, and I just would take a note to invite any of the board members. It's Friday morning via Zoom at 9:30 in the morning. If you want the link, reach out to me. The reason why I think this one is interesting is the former Minnesota Supreme Court Justice Alan Page and Neil Kashkari, who's the Federal Reserve Bank of Minneapolis's president, are really advocating for a Minnesota state constitutional amendment, making education a right for all. So it's really going to be a discussion on equitable education models and what we as school boards and just citizens can do to help make that happen. So I think I've listened to Neil many times talk, and I feel like he's brilliant and really well spoken on this topic specifically, and I think it would be a really great Zoom chat Friday morning. So if you want the link, reach out. And I'll report back next month.
Okay, great. Yeah, C usually has some really interesting speakers, so
Yeah.
they do a nice job. Technology?
Yes, so a lot of topics to discuss at the beginning of the school year. First and foremost is Chromebook availability. As anybody that has tried to purchase a Chromebook in the last days and weeks has noticed, they're in short supply. You can barely find them. So we're just monitoring all of that. And for parents that are out there that are still looking for Chromebooks, just every day, just check, online. And if you are looking to purchase one on your own, is where I'm going with that, is just continue to look online and see and snap them up if you get the chance. We're looking at, with the Chromebooks, moving some of those that we have to a 1 week versus a 1 day checkout. Just with being in the hybrid learning model, 1 day is not long enough to check out a Chromebook, so we're gonna move some of that to a 1 week model where kids can check those out. We got all of our hotspots up and running, like the ones similar to what we had last spring for those that have challenges or need, an internet connection. So that's up and running well. We switched from Rapid ID to Omni ID, which is our login, our kind of our single sign-on login that many of you have seen when you log in to your email, and I'm sure staff and others have seen that as well due to the food service and activities. It's working pretty well. There are some glitches though with it, and they've had to fix some issues, some user accounts related to that. So just continue to use that portal, and we'll move forward there. The staff computers, they came in a little bit later than what we wanted, so we're waiting to install some of those. However, we did get some access points, some wireless Wi-Fi access points at Park, and those are installed and working. We do have our critical childcare, and our technology folks did install a computer there and a printer and some phones and internet and things, so they were good to get that up and running for them as well. With doing a lot of the distance learning and running, video and a lot of Zoom calls and various things, Google meetings and things, they've been monitoring the bandwidth usage. We've been in good shape so far. LCTN, which we are actually meeting next month, actually took the cap off of our bandwidth, and we believe that, so we're kind of unsure of what the actual cap is. We believe it's 2.2 gigabytes worth of traffic, but we're still well within that, but we're monitoring that to ensure that we have the bandwidth suitable to run everything that we're doing over the hybrid model and distance and things. So we have that. And then there was one last update, which is kind of cool, just at a high level. The Infinite Campus was updated, so it kind of reflects some of the blended learning. So a teacher can look in there and they know when the student is hybrid, or they know when they're in person and things like that. So that's cool as well. That's a technology update.
Good, thanks, Chris. Any other committee reports? If not, we'll move on to resolution accepting donations. And I guess I just have a question, Tina or Darren, isn't this the same resolution we do every quarter? Okay, so I don't know that we need to keep reading this every 3 months, so I'm just going to read the title, Resolution Accepting Donations, which meets the legal requirement to adopt the resolution. And then more importantly is to see the list of our donors. So in the last quarter, these are the donations that the school district has received. And we're just so thankful for the wonderful, generous community partners that we have. So you can see the donor and the item amount that they've given and designated purpose. So thank you to all of those donors. Again, we just appreciate our generous community partners. So with that, we would need a motion, though, to adopt that resolution that includes that list.
So moved.
Second?
Okay, there is a motion and second. Any other discussion? And if not, we will vote by roll call vote, beginning with Director Bernard.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye,
Aye.
Aye.
and the resolution passes. Thank you, and thank you again to our donors. So if there's no other business, we'll move on to our upcoming board meetings. To just announce, our next regular board meeting will be on Monday, October 12th at 5:30 p.m. right here in the council chambers. And then we also have a quarterly meeting in October, on October 26th at 5:30 p.m. to be determined as to the location. But then before that, I think Darren is looking at a special meeting for next Monday.
Yeah, we were looking at a meeting specifically to address and accept the bids that we received on Thursday. We were hoping to be able to turn those bids around, but because of the amount of bid packages there was and having to check for references and qualifications of the contractors that submitted them, we were not able to get that done by tonight. So we're looking at potentially either a noon or a late afternoon meeting, whatever you guys would prefer. We could do it virtually if that works best.
So we're not looking at a long meeting. It's probably 15 minutes or so. I mean, we need to review that and then approve that bid package that would be recommended and vetted by that time.
Correct.
Okay, but we need to have a quorum. So
I'm
does
available
noon-
Monday. I can do lunch or afternoon.
So does noon work for a virtual meeting for everybody?
Yeah,
Okay.
I'll be up in St. Cloud, but I should be able to.
Sure. Yeah, if we can do that virtually, I think that makes it a little easier for everyone to attend. So let's announce that. So next Monday, the 21st, at noon, will be a special meeting of the Hutchinson Board of Education for the purpose of approving bid package number 26, or whatever it is.
It's actually like bid package 6 to 22, I
Okay.
believe. I don't have the details in front of me, but there's a number of them.
Lots, okay. Anything else that we need to include with that in terms of, and then an agenda will be sent out and notification, 72 hours in advance, of course. Anything else? If not, we've got listed the upcoming committee meetings. I'll let you review those. If there's nothing further, I would accept a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Motion and second. Any other discussion? If not, those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say no. We're adjourned. Boy, it's nice to just be able to do that, isn't it?
And not have to